Response video to that old hacks guy. I guess I'll do it on the instant runoff voting channel, because it's sort of going to be on that subject, mostly, partly anyway. So he made a couple of points. First, he's talking again about this fair tax and the fact that somehow the rich and their consumption, and no, it's not what it's about. If you don't tax the wealth and the consolidation of wealth, then what the rich can do is they can expand that wealth because it's not going to be taxed. So that gives it even more power. So any savings becomes more and more powerful for the wealthy, any surplus accrued. And then they can distribute that wealth basically to their kind or their clan or their whatever. And you can have a whole class of people who will live on leisure. And the workers are going to have to make up for that. Somehow they're going to have to be the productive core of the economy to feed that rich class. So a regressive tax, like a flat tax, it makes no sense. It makes no economic sense. It's not durable for the long term. It doesn't fix the real problems with free markets and all the rest of that stuff. And it just makes all those problems worse. You need progressive taxation, or you need an elimination of a concept like inheritance. Or else consolidation will destroy an economy and create people who don't have to work, and that's the bottom line. I mean, how much money can you possibly spend? I mean, yeah, there are examples of rich people who just squander their money, but there's a certain limit. I mean, you build yourself a nice mansion, and you get your yacht and your Ferrari and the rest of that stuff, and that's about all. And so unless you're going to be gluttonous about it, it's not going to be there to spend. And if you have a flat tax and the rich are going to pay on everything they buy, then they'll buy less, and so that's not going to be any good for the economy either. So it doesn't change the basic equation, and it doesn't fix what's basically wrong with our economy, which is we don't put enough productivity incentive carrots in front of the right people. We put them in front of the wrong people, and we basically give them carrots for doing nothing through birthright and through ownership of the capitalist system, and that's what's got to go. So that I don't want a flat tax. I don't want what you call a fair tax, because it's not fair. So it's not going to fix birthright. It's not going to do anything to even compensate for it. All right, so then you start off by saying instant runoff voting isn't any better. I mean, it's just a stupid remark to make. It's a huge difference. All right, it makes third parties viable, which means the other parties have to sit there and argue with them. They have to sit there and oblige people through persuasion not to vote for that third party. And if you get a really competitive third party, it can win. And so, it's a huge difference. And if you combine it with getting rid of the geographic bias in the districts, the voting districts, then you really have a representative democracy that means something, okay? Because you won't have the same election taking place in 50 states or in 500 different congressional districts, where the same majority gets to win each one, because all the minority interests are, although substantial in population, will always lose a winner-take-all election in a voting district. And so if you open the system up, represent ideology instead of geography, it's a huge difference to the system. I just can't I mean, it's, everything you can accomplish through your initiative, direct democracy, you can accomplish through having representatives, and I'd rather have a representative. A person I tend to vote for is likely going to be smarter than me. I'm going to likely attempt to vote for somebody smarter than myself, and so will most voters. And the odds are the people they choose as representatives are going to be smarter than they are. And so you have better government that way, not lesser government that way. And you won't have the same corruption. You won't have the same interest, because the people will be motivated by principles, not devotion to a party. Again, you've got to understand that once you institute instant runoff voting, money doesn't make the same amount of difference anymore. And if you abolish the regional pork, it really isn't going to make a difference anymore, because then it's going to be about making a persuasive argument in a pool of 500 other people running, instead of making a persuasive argument between yourself and some complete asshole Republican. You're not going to be running against one or two other people. You're going to be running against hundreds of other people. And so you're going to have to really demonstrate some integrity. I'm not going to vote for anybody who isn't going to, like, if I had the freedom to vote, I won't vote for anybody who doesn't say he's willing to take a polygraph test. Right there. So, I mean, I can set my standards, and they can meet those standards or choose not to meet those standards. But my first vote isn't going to go to somebody who won't meet those standards, and it's going to mean something in the end when people have to start competing with people's real desires and what they really want from a representative. And like I said, I think it answers all the questions. And I want policy that's disciplined, okay? And people, okay, the average person isn't. They're neither disciplined enough to do the research necessary, to be informed enough about what they're voting on. You're better off having people that ultimately have to make the decision, that have to take responsibility for what they're doing. And the other advantage of a representative government, full of representatives, is it's a much more disciplined argument. I mean, you can't have an argument between, hundreds of millions of Americans, but you can have an argument between 500 representatives in a deliberative body. That is possible, and that's where the argument needs to be made. And you want the best arguers fighting the fight. It's like, if we're all going to be in a fight, we might as well pick somebody we want to do the fighting for us, somebody who's persuasive and has the charisma and has all the qualities that are necessary to make a persuasive argument. But all these issues aren't going to get dealt with until they get argued in those deliberative bodies. I mean, the simplistic soundbite yammer that takes place in the mass media isn't going to be enough. So again, you raise this marijuana issue, like somehow, if initiatives were in place, that somehow we'd have some national initiative that would pass on marijuana. No, it wouldn't. Okay, so because the argument still hasn't been made. A persuasive argument has to be made, a bargain. It's a political issue. And for it to pass political muster, you have to give people something. You can't just say, yes, let's legalize drugs. No, it has to come with a bargain where people will have accountability. So you can't be flying airplanes stoned. You can't be doing this. You can't, there has to be drug testing. There has to be a lot of things thrown in that pile to make it possible for there to be decriminalization of drugs. I mean, yes, of course I'm for it, but I understand the political reality that you're not going to convince somebody who has no reason to give you a right to give you a right unless you make it clear that it's in their interest. All right, and there's something for them to gain. I mean, unfortunately, that's part of the problem with democracy, is it's really easy for them to give away rights they don't need. And because they're not principled enough, because we haven't really articulated strongly enough the principles in the Constitution. If people really understood what they're supposed to be voting on, they'd understand when they're not supposed to step over a certain line, but they don't. I mean, you can see it in the abortion argument. Clearly a religious argument. Clearly. I mean, 90–80% of the motivation of the people who are against abortions, it's a religiously based judgment. And that shouldn't have a place in politics. It shouldn't have a place in deciding what people's liberty is going to be under the United States Constitution. People should have the discipline, the mental discipline to say, yes, I don't have a right to impose dogma on other people. That's just bullshit. All right, so back to, you also mentioned health care. Yeah, I'm for a single payer, but I'm not for universal health care. I mean, not in the sense of everything and anything covered and all that kind of stuff. Not full coverage. I'm for minimum coverage, guaranteed, and any extra coverage be up to the individual to decide to pay for that through premiums. But the idea that as it is now, we're spending way too much keeping very unproductive medical treatments that are being distributed, and we'll all end up subsidizing that. And I don't see any reason to subsidize Karen Ann Quinlan's. And until we change the law, I'm not going to be for giving people as much health care as they want, because they often want what's way beyond practical. Okay, again, you keep bragging that every congressman, every representative would be corrupt. It's just nonsense. if you know there's a few people in this fucking country you could trust. And again, I'll just make the same argument again. If you can't trust the people you're voting for, how can you trust the other people that are voting? So I mean, it's an idiotic notion. I mean, if people aren't responsible enough to choose responsible representatives, how the hell can they write responsible legislation? It doesn't make any sense. One is so much easier to do than the other. If they can't do the easy one, which is choosing somebody smarter than yourself to represent you, are more honest than yourself, then I say that's a pretty failed concept.